We are in chapter 17, Mishnah Aleph. It's a good introduction because now we're going to learn all the laws of Muktzeh. And I would say the majority of what we're going to learn is actually relevant to today. It's actually the halacha. Yeah, I would say most of it. Okay, let's look. ביאור משנה א', the explanation for Mishnah Aleph. כבר הזכרנו בפתיחה למסכתנו, we already mentioned in the beginning of this מסכת, שדברים שאינם מוכנים מערב שבת, things that in your mind, if you ask you Friday, are you going to use these things on Shabbos? Or is somebody going to use this thing on Shabbos? In other words, in your mind, subconsciously, you're intending to use בשבת לצרכי דברים מותרים. Obviously, you're only allowed to use things that you're allowed to use. You're not allowed to use your car on Shabbat.
If I'm thinking before Shabbos that I'm going to take the hammer and use it to
we're going to discuss this. We're going to discuss this. No. We're going to discuss hammer is a study because
something else doesn't matter a hammer or
no because the hammer.
You have to think about it.
So let's discuss this. It's important to know the differentiation. A spoon you're going to use on Shabbos for sure. You don't have a hammer. Not necessarily you're going to use on Shabbos. You're not going to use on Shabbos. Most people do not think that they're going to use the hammer on Shabbos. So therefore, according to this logic so far, you will not be allowed to use the hammer on Shabbos.
Why? According to this logic, I will.
No, you're not.
If I think about it before Shabbos, that's what it said. שאינם מוכנים ערב. I מכין את זה מערב שבת. I tell myself, here is the hammer, I tilt it. This is for my nuts.
Yeah,
I do nuts with it.
But you
before Shabbos.
But you have to remember, we're not talking about you as an individual. We're talking about things that society thinks. If somebody is weird, we're going to discuss somebody else.
Okay.
Yeah, usually a person is not going to go and use a hammer for nuts.
So what does it mean? I just don't understand what it means. Okay.
It means like everything that if I ask you, you're going to use it on Shabbat? Most people are going to use this on Shabbat.
What?
The chair, you're going to use it on Shabbat?
Of course.
Of course. Your phone, you're going to use it on Shabbat?
Yes. No.
No. So this is the two examples. Look at it. Your chair is not muktzeh. Your phone is muktzeh. Forget for zeu. A pen, are you going to use on Shabbat?
But what does it have to be מוכנים מערב Shabbat? I don't understand. זה מה שאני מנסה להבין.
In your mind.
To be prepared for...
In your mind, they're prepared to be used.
The chair?
Yeah. Subconsciously, you know you're going to use the chair on Shabbat.
Okay.
The pen, you know you're not going to use on Shabbat. It's not prepared for Shabbat. Okay. So the question is going to come later on. Maybe I have something I can use it for that is permissible, but we're going to discuss later on. Okay. But this is the easy part. But it's going to get more complicated. So all the things that you are not in your mind to be used, אסרו חכמים לטלטלם בשבת, והם הנקראים אסורי מוקצה. So all the things that you don't have in mind to use them before Shabbat, it's not you in mind. People don't have them in mind. Yeah, the general population doesn't have them in them. They're called muktzeh. Those people called muktzeh. בעניין זה, כותב הרמב"ם, over here the Rambam writes, אסרו חכמים לטלטל מקצת בדברים בשבת, כדרך שהוא עושה בחול. It says the sages prohibited to move even a little bit of object on Shabbat on the way you do it in a regular weekday. ומפני מה נגעו באיסור זה? And why did the sages put themselves over here? Who told them, what's the problem? In other words, God never said you're not allowed to touch a pen on Shabbat. God says you're not allowed to write on Shabbat. Right? אמרו, the sages says, ומה אם הזהירו נביאים וציוו שלא יהיה הילולך בשבת כי הילולך בחול? It says the prophet Yeshaya says that it should be seen on a person that the way he walks on Shabbat is not the same way he walks on a weekday. ולא שיחת השבת כשיחת החול, and you can see him by the way he speaks that on Shabbat, that this is today's Shabbat and not a weekday. In other words, the way you speak, the manner you speak, on this topic you speak. שנאמר, because Yeshayahu said, "Vedaber davar." He read it from the verses. Vedaber davar. What does it mean, daber davar?
Nor speaking thereof.
That's right. It means that you should speak on Shabbat differently than you should speak on a weekday.
also?
Walking. So it says, if the prophet Yeshaya was talking about speaking and walking, how much more so, קל וחומר, how much more so, שלא יהיה טלטול בשבת כטלטול בחול. You shouldn't be moving objects on Shabbat like you are moving objects in a weekday. Why? And it's obvious, he says, כדי שלא יהיה כיום חול בעיניו, because otherwise it's going to become like a weekday in your eyes. The atmosphere is going to become weekday-like. ויבוא להגביה ולתקן כלים מפינה לפינה ומבית לבית. It says, you know what's going to happen? All during the week, what are you doing? You're walking. Shabbat, all of a sudden, you have time. But your house is a mess. So
I'm going to move those rocks over here.
That's right. I'm going to move. I'm going to clean up over here. I'm going to clean up over there. I'm going to clean up over there. And then Shabbat is going to look like a weekday. It says that's why the sages came in. It says once we allowed you to fold stuff, to do stuff, to here, to move there, it's going to be a disaster. It says don't touch. You're not allowed to touch anything. If it's not for Shabbat, don't touch it. Because otherwise we know what your psyche is going to tell you to do. It's permitted. So you're going to act on Shabbat. You're going to keep, and subconsciously you're even going to keep some work that you can do during the week. You can leave it for Shabbat. Because you're going to say, Shabbat is going to have extra time to do it. So it says, no. You're not allowed to, if you didn't have an intention for it for Shabbat, don't touch it. That's the idea. להגביה, לתקן כלים מפינה לפינה, או מבית לבית, to move objects from house to house, או להצניע אבנים, or to put stones, וכיוצא בהם, שהרי שהוא בטל ויושב בביתו, because on Shabbat you have extra time. You're sitting in your house, you're not working. ויבקש דבר שיתעסק בו. Naturally you're going to look for things to do. ונמצא שלא שבת ובטל הטעם שנאמר בתורה למען ינוח. And then it's going to be, you're not actually going to rest on Shabbat, and you're going to transgress over the custom of resting on Shabbat. ועוד, another reason, כשיבקר ויטלטל כלים שמלאכתם לאיסור, if we would let you take objects that are not allowed to be used, like a pen, like a hammer, for example, yeah? It's things for building. If we let you do it, אפשר שיתעסק בהם מעט ויבוא לידי מלאכה. You're going to come next to a nail. Oh, you have the hammer in your hand already. So, boom, it's going to come in. It's going to happen. So that's how we don't say, don't touch the hammer. So there. ועוד, another reason, we're going to see that we're going to have use for the hammers later on, but for now, for the simple part. ועוד, במפני שמקצת העם אינם בעלי אומניות. It says, you have to remember also, there are people, some of the nations are not artists, they're not artisans, they don't do things with their hands. אלא בטלים כל ימיהם. They do nothing all day long. Today you can call these guys, guys who are on the stock market, or I don't know, people who don't create things with their hands. Whatever you call, you want to call these guys.
All the doctors.
Doctors, lawyers.
I couldn't tell you that.
Not you. You're not a regular.
And also, besides that, you've got, what about all these guys that are pensioners, pensioners, they don't do nothing, and people who are rich, they don't work. What about those guys? כגון הטיילין, for all those guys who are on constant vacation, ויושבי קרנות, all those who sit in the corner, like by 7-Eleven, do nothing. You think something changed? Even then you had these guys that sit by 7-Eleven all day long and do nothing. שכל ימיהם היו שובתים במלאכה. These guys never worked. ואם יהיו מותר להלך ולדבר ולטלטל כשאר הימים, if they will be allowed to walk, to speak, and to move objects just like any other days, נמצא שלא שבת שביתה ניכרת. So for them, for sure, there's not going to be a difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov, and between Shabbos and Yom Chol, between Shabbos and a regular day, because it's exactly the same thing. So even for them, you need to make something. For the pensioners,
For them it's harder.
yeah, you need to make them a difference. What's the difference between today and tomorrow? Oh, today I'm not allowed to touch all these things. That's the difference. לפיכך, שביתה מדברים אלו, therefore, when a person doesn't do these things, היא שביתה שווה בכל אדם. This is now, everybody is equal. ומפני דברים אלו נגעו באיסור הטלטול. This is why the sages came and says, don't touch objects on Shabbat. Yeah, those objects that are not for Shabbat, don't touch them. ואסרו שלא יטלטל אדם בשבת, אלא כלים הצריך להם. In other words, you're only allowed to use, and here comes your thing with the hammer. Now the hammer has a couple of uses, but if you need the tool, maybe you'll be allowed to use it. If you need the tool, maybe you're allowed to use it. אלא כלים הצריך להם. Things that you need them. So, כמו שהתבהר, like it's going to explain, יש כלי שמלאכתו להיתר. There are, what do you call it? Tools that are allowed to be used. And these are easy, you can see it in your house. והוא כלי שמותר לעשות בו בשבת, דבר שנעשה בו בחול. It is a vessel that you're allowed to use on Shabbat, just like you're allowed to use on a weekday. כגון כוס לשתות בו. For example, a cup. A cup, Shabbat and Yom, and regular day are exactly the same, you're allowed to touch them. There's no difference between them. וקערה לאכול בה, or a bowl to eat in it. וסכין לחתוך בו בשר ופת. A knife to cut flesh, a knife to cut bread. וקורנס לפצוע בו אגוזים. And a hammer, yeah, to a nutcracker, yeah, but only a nutcracker, yeah. If you use it for nut cracking, then you're allowed to. וכיוצא בהם, and similar to that, yeah, and similar to them. So if the kurnas לפצוע בהם אגוזים, it has to be a nutcracker. In other words, you don't use it for nails. It's a tool you'll find in the kitchen, not a tool you'll find in the shed. The difference, yeah. ויש כלי שמלאכתן לאיסור. There's also tools that that their job is prohibited on Shabbat. והוא הכלי שאסור לעשות בו בשבת, דבר שנעשה בו, כגון מכתשת, for example, things that you're not allowed to use. For example, something you grind with, or something you tear things up with, וכיוצא בהם, שאסור לכתוש ולטחון בשבת, because you're not allowed to grind on Shabbat. So the pepper mill, you have a pepper mill, that's not allowed on Shabbat, even though it's in the kitchen, because the work of doing pepper is not allowed. So even if you have a pepper mill on the Shabbat, you're not allowed to use it. כל כלי שמלאכתו להיתר, every vessel that is permissible to be used, בין היה של עץ או חרס או של אבן, I don't care what is it made out of, wood or clay or stone, או של מתכות or metal, מותר לטלטלו בשבת. You're allowed to move it on Shabbat. And now we're going to see there are reasons to move things. There are reasons to move things. Maybe you're not just allowed to play with it, but you're allowed to use it, to move it for a specific case. What's the cases? בין בשביל עצמו של כלי. Whether you want the vessel is in the rain and it's going to become dirty or whatever it is. So you want to save the vessel, you can move it and put it in the right place. כגון שמפנהו מן החמה או מן הגשמים כדי שלא ייפסד. You're allowed to move it if it gets damaged. בין לצורך מקומו. Whether you need the space where the vessel is on, you need the table. Right? So there's a knife on the table. You need to use the table. You can move the knife away from the table. Not the knife. No. It is the knife. The knife for the meat.
Because it says these are permissible.
Yeah, permitted. Then the knife for the meat. בין לצורך מקומו. כגון שהוא רוצה לשבת במקום שמונח הכלי. You have a knife on your chair. You're allowed to move it.
Well, why you can?
But they are permissible anyway.
You can move. Yeah, you can move permissible anyway.
No. You're allowed to move it for Shabbat purposes. We're going to see soon.
Okay.
בין לצורך גופו, whether you need it for its you need it for its purpose, you need to cut meat.
For Shabbos.
For Shabbos. לצורך גוף הכלי להשתמש בו, כגון קערה לאכול בה. You need to use the bowl in order to use it. Notice, it didn't say you're allowed to just play around with it. For example, if I'm on the Shabbos table and I have the corkscrew, the corkscrew, I opened the bottle already. I opened the wine bottle, and I just play around with the corkscrew. Am I allowed to? I just want to play, to do something with listen, it's one of the things that it's mentioned over here. I'm allowed to move it for all the things. If I need a space, I need to use it. Otherwise, it doesn't look like it gives me even permission with something permissible to use. unless I have a use for it. Over here, I'm just bored. I want to do something with my hands. I don't know if he's allowing me to use it. Yeah, just by the way.
So that is, that's the chair. It's almost everything, right?
Anything.
If it's not for Shabbos, don't move it.
If you don't, or maybe you need a space for it.
Right, but the space for Shabbos.
The
Not
spa-
saying
yeah. It has
Kli
to.
is over there. I want to move it over there just because it's taking up space.
Or
in the
because
house.
otherwise you'll be allowed to take your cabinet
Right.
and put everything back from one cabinet to another cabinet. Yeah?
Yeah.
Let's say you want the milchik, the wife decides on Shabbat, I want all the milchik spoons to be over here on the other side of the kitchen. So she's not allowed to take all the milchik spoons and put them on the other side of the kitchen. Because there's no reason to do this kind of job on Shabbat. They're not going to allow her. Yeah? That's the idea. So, but this is the most permissible way. And then we have the second most permissible.
But if it's have a hole in the roof and it's raining into my stencils there, all this, and now I can move them the other side, so they're not going to get...
Yes, then you can move it, because it's gufo. You're saving the object itself. You're saving the object itself, yes. וכל כלי שמלאכתו לאיסור, and now, what about vessels that are forbidden? בין היה של עץ, או של חרץ, או של אבנים, או של מתכת, it doesn't matter from what it was made out of. מותר לטלטלו בשבת, you're allowed to use it on Shabbat. Now, how are you allowed to use it?
אבל למה אתה אומר use it? Say לטלטלו.
You're allowed to, sorry, not allowed to use it. You're allowed to move it on Shabbat. That's what I meant. I didn't mean use. I meant move. You're allowed to move it on Shabbat, בין לצורך גופו, whether it is for its purpose. What does it mean? Here's your example. Even though a hammer is not allowed to be used on Shabbat, I want to use the hammer for a permissible thing on Shabbat. Not for to work on my house. I want it to open up the nuts. That's why I use the hammer. כגון, מכתשת לשבור עליה אגוזים. Or I'm going to take something, מכתשת is like a grinder. You know, like a grinder for cheese. But it has those time it used to be made out of solid metal. And I want to put the gauze on it to bang on it. The nut on it to bang on top of it. בין לצורך מקומו, whether it is I need it space, אבל בשביל עצמו של כלי אסור. Here comes the difference. If it's raining on the hammer, and the hammer is going to get damaged, I'm not allowed to move it. That's the difference between כלי שמלאכתו להיתר, לכלי שמלאכתו לאיסור. If it's a tool, a knife, that I use for Shabbat, and it rains on the knife, I'm allowed to move the knife. If it rains on the hammer, I'm not allowed to use the hammer.
What if it's a pot that you can move, but you don't want gonna?
It doesn't matter if you're gonna. It's a kli shel machto le'eter. It's permissible. It's a vessel.
Okay.
It's a vessel, therefore you're allowed to. V'chol she'eino kli. So that's the second. So there's going to be a difference between a vessel, a tool that you're allowed to use, and a tool that you're not allowed to use. What's the difference? Letzorech gufo shel kli. If you want to save the object itself, are you allowed to move it? וכל שאינו כלי, anything that is not a vessel, כגון אבנים, ומעות, וקנים, וקירות, וכיוצא בהם, money for example, yeah, in those things, אסור לטלטלן, you're not allowed to move them at all. So there's a big difference if, let's say, there's a knife on the table, there's a hammer on the table, a hammer for working, not for nuts, and money on the table. The knife on the table, to use for Shabbos, you can use for if it's raining, right? It's raining on the knife, it's going to come damage, you're allowed to move the knife. The hammer, if it's raining on the hammer, you're not allowed to remove the hammer. But you're allowed to remove the hammer if you need the space where the hammer is. If there's money on the table, you might not be allowed to move the money, even if you need the space for the table. You need to eat. You might not be allowed to move the money. That's the difference in muktzah. There's 3 types of muktzah.
And what's the difference with the money?
Money is the most severe.
Because you can't use it at all.
It's the most severe one, yeah.
With a hammer, you might be able to use it.
There's some permissible uses of hammer. For example, I'll give you a television, not today's television, the old style televisions. You know, the wide ones. Yeah? Even though they're connected to the electricity, there's a way you can use it. You know, if it's like this tall, you move it a little bit, put a tablecloth on it, and eat on it. Use it as a table. So you can say, on Shabbat, you're allowed to move a television because there's some purpose that you can use it for. But money, what's your purpose to move it? You have no purpose to move.
We need the space.
Oh, so for the television, you're allowed to use it even though you don't need the space. That's the difference.
You need to use it.
Or you're allowed to use it as a table.
But you have to think about that from before Shabbos, that you're going to use it for a table.
Not necessarily. No.
That's my problem here in the whole thing, but you don't touch it.
You don't. Why? For the same reason you don't need to think about the hammer before Shabbos.
The hammer, you can't move it because it's raining.
Yeah, but the hammer you're allowed to use for nuts, right?
Oh, you're allowed to use it for nuts?
You're allowed to use it for nuts.
You have to think about it, that before Shabbos you use the hammer for nuts?
You don't have to.
So in other words, if my nutcracker broke,
you're allowed to
go to my garage,
very good.
take a hammer and start to use it for
very good, very good, very good, excellent. You're allowed to use it
and
for...
I don't have to think before that I'm going to...
Very good, but only for permissible things on Shabbat. You're allowed to be able to use it. The money has no permissible things for Shabbat to do with it. There's nothing you're going to find.
אז למה הוא מדבר דברים שמוכנים מערב, שלא מוכנים מערב שבת, אסור להשתמש בהם? I did not prepare the hammer from ערב שבת to להשתמש ולאגוזים. So how come now you let me use it? So that's what I don't understand.
It depends there's 3 levels of gradient. Okay, if it's a permissible thing, I can use it, I can move it, not use it. I can move it even for the sake of the instrument itself. If it is a hammer, I will not be allowed to move it for the sake of the instrument. That's the difference.
And why not?
That's the way they did muktzah.
Because in one part he said here that
I'll give you an example.
They move kli that in the rain and it's in the chama, you can move it.
Because it's permissible. It's a permissible thing.
Tool.
So the way
hammer is a permissible because you do a gozim.
No. If it's a hammer for a gozim, you're right. But over here it's the hammer that's in the shed.
In other words, if it's a hammer that I use in the house and I use a gozim on the time,
it's permissible.
That's the
permissible
definition for the Shabbos clean.
That's right.
In other words, this become to be a vessel that you always use it. So
very good.
It's not for a hammer. It's for a gozim.
That's right. Very good. Very good.
No.
So, הלכות אלו בעניין טלטול כלים מקורם בפרק זה. So, by the way, this is what we're going to discuss all these details over here in this Mishnahs. וכן נשנים בו דיני מוקצה אחרים. So, this is what we're going to cover now. משנתנו עוסקת בכלים בעלי דלתות. Our Mishnah is going to deal with vessels that have doors. Think about it like cabinets. But movable cabinets, not stuck to the wall cabinets.
With the wheels.
The wheels or whatever, drawers, or like this one.
It's not built in.
It's not built in. Yeah, movable furniture. כגון ארון או תיבה שמלאכתם להיתר. For example, these cabinets over here. You're allowed to use it on Shabbat.
I can understand why מלאכתם להיתר.
Because
הארון, מה אני אשתמש בו לשבת? אני אעלה עליו ויתחיל לרקוד?
To put things inside. You use it to put things inside. You're allowed to use the aron.
זה מלאכתם בשבת.
Yeah,
אז זה לא, אז הארון used for the clothes.
That's right.
Okay.
For whatever, it doesn't matter. Cabinet, whatever. You're allowed to use it for Shabbat. It's permissible. Yeah.
Like a plate.
Yeah. והיא באה ללמד, and it comes to teach you, don't make a mistake. It says, שיש הבדל בין דלתות אלו לדלתות הבית. There are differences between the doors on cabinets and doors on the house. In other words, you're thinking that all doors are the same. You're saying, no. Some doors are kli shemelachtam leheter, are permissible doors. Some doors are forbidden doors. So not all doors are the same. That's what we're going to learn first. Now, kol hakelim, all the vessel, look what it says, the vessels. What does it mean, vessels? It's not built in. If you have something which is built in, it's not considered a vessel. Yeah, it's very, very important. It has to be not built in, not connected. Kitchen cabinet might consider to be a wall. Yeah. Different rules. Yeah. We're going to see. Yeah, it's considered like a house. It's a different rules. Nitalim b'Shabbat v'dlatotehen imahem. They're allowed to be taken on Shabbat, and the doors are with them. In other words, the doors are part of the cabinet. Klomar, which means, כל הכלים שיש להם דלתות, all vessels that have a lid or have a door, כגון ארון וארגז, like all kind of cabinet, שמשתמשים בהם לדברים המותרים, that you use them for permissible things, בשבת, מותר לטלטלם בשבת יחד עם דלתותיהם. In other words, the door is subservient to the vessel. It's part of the vessel, and you're allowed to open it and close it and do whatever. We're not talking about connected doors. I'm talking about unconnected doors, right?
Unconnected door.
You know, connected doors, it has hinges. Yeah. No, it's not connected. In those times, they didn't have so much hinges, so much things. It was like you stick it in and take it out. You know, like a drawer. You stick in the drawer, you take out the drawer. You know, think it like this. This is like a door, or a door that you put it in. Plug it in. Call it like a plug-in. Exactly. אף על פי שנתפרקו בשבת. It says even though they came apart on Shabbat. So if you take out from your cabinet, you take out the drawer and it came all the way out, and now it's sitting the drawer on the floor. It says, hey, maybe I'm not allowed to put it back in because I'm making a cabinet. So no, it's fine. This is what the purpose is. Put the stuff in, put back the drawer, you're fine. You're not creating anything. You're good. Continue on your way. בגמרא מבואר, in the Gemara, it explains, אף על פי שנתפרקו, ניטלים הם בשבת. Even though they became apart, you're allowed to move them on Shabbat. כלומר, אף על פי שנתפרקו הדלתות מן הכלים לפני השבת, even though they were apart before שבת, ובשעת כניסת השבת כבר לא מחובר לכלי, and even in the time שבת came in, it was apart, מותרות הדלתות להיטלטל בשגב אגב הכלי. You're allowed to move the doors, even because the door is part of the cabinet. It's not a part.
Like a pad that have a cover.
Exactly. That's exactly.
Cover. This is what feed. This is
That's exactly. So even though you don't have a purpose for the cover, you're allowed to move the cover because of the cabinet, because of the door. That's the question. In other words, the cover, usually when you use a cover for the heating process. And on Shabbat, you're not going to heat. So maybe I'm only allowed to take the pot, I'm not allowed to take the cover. So he tells me, no, you're also allowed to take the cover.
I don't want the fly going there.
Yeah, whatever. Even if I don't want the fly to get in there, that's the point. I'm allowed to take the cover. Okay. That's the idea. Yeah, very good.
In other words, if you don't have even to use it.
That's right. It's still considered kli shemelachto leheter. Unlike the hammer. It looks like a hammer, but it's not like a hammer. That's what he's trying to tell you. But it says, don't make a mistake. The doors for your house, on the other hand, are different.
Better.
Now, again, we're not talking about the doors we have today. Again, plug-in doors. plug-in doors. שאינם דומים דלתות הכלים לדלתות הבית. They're not similar to the doors of the house. שאסור לטלטלם כשנתפרקו מן הבית. Because the doors of the house, if they're off the hinges, you're not allowed to touch them. You're not allowed to move them. They actually are forbidden. לפי שאינם מן המוכן. They're considered to be not from the things that are prepared. What does it mean? שדלתות הבית אינו מן המוכן לטלטול. There's no person in his mind that has the door prepared to be put up on his hinges on Shabbat. In other words, the plug-in for cabinets, people know on Shabbat I'm going to plug it in, plug it out. But the doors on the house, people don't have in their mind, I'm going to plug it in, plug it out. The doors of the house.
He goes from the house, you plug it in, he wants to close his house.
No, usually the doors are on hinges. But this door fell off the hinges.
Oh, they
fell off the hinges.
So now he's not allowed to put it.
That's right. Unlike the cabinet. The cabinet always plug it in, plug it out.
Yeah, but they don't have the hinges. That's the difference.
Yeah.
The hinges is the difference.
Yeah. לפי כלומר, שלא נעשו לטלטול, and there's another difference. Even though the doors might be a plug-in, always, they never have hinges, you still will not be allowed to. Why? שלא נעשו לטלטול, אלא לשימוש הבית המחובר לקרקע. They were never meant to move around. What's the difference? So now we come to a difference between a cabinet that are built in and a cabinet that's not built in. If a door of a cabinet, plug-in door of a cabinet that's built into the wall fell out, I'm not sure you'll be allowed to move it. Because the whole cabinet is not movable. So in other words, the house is not a movable house, so therefore the door is not movable. But if the cabinet is a movable cabinet, the door is part of the cabinet. That's the idea.
Anything that's part of a movable object, in a way, is permissible.
Excellent.
If it's not movable,
it's not permissible.
Attached to the house, attached to the wall, attached to the floor.
Very good. Very good.
Muktzeh.
Very good. So the car door?
If it fall down?
Yeah.
Car's movable.
It's muktzeh, man. ברור שזה. זה
No,
part of the door.
the
יש
car...
hinges.
What?
יש לו hinges לדור. אתה לא יכול להחזיר.
Let's say this door is a plug-in door. I have a plug-in door on the car.
גם.
I'm allowed to use...
Oh, because it's... אתה יכול... יש פה עניין שכן.
It's actually a hard
אבל
one.
זה לא something that people use for.
I think that a car is considered like רשות היחיד. It's like a house that is moving. So therefore you will not be allowed to move it in because it's the whole house. It's only a house. It's like a boat.
It's a house that moves.
It's a house that moves. So it's not a tool. It's not a cabinet. So probably not. Yeah? But interesting just to think about this. It goes on a lot of things. Hilkach turat muktzeh alehen. Because they're not movable, because the house is not movable, the door becomes not movable. ואפילו מן התפרקו מן הבית בשבת אסור לטלטל עליהם. Even if they fell off the house on Shabbat, you're not allowed to move them. מה שאין כן דלתות הכלים שאגב הכלים אף דלתו לא מוכנים לטלטול. It's not so with a movable object, like a cabinet, that the door goes after the cabinet. Therefore you're allowed to move the door.
So maybe with a motorhome.
Same as the car.
It falls out.
Same as the car. It's a movable house. It's a movable house.
So movable house says that you can't.
It's a house. It's not a... I don't think movable means...
The whole thing.
Yeah. It means the object inside the thing. It's not considered movable. Yeah. בעל תפארת ישראל, the commentary בעל תפארת ישראל מפרש, explain שמשנתנו נקטה ודלתותיהם עמהם. Our Mishnah says the doors are with them, לרבותה, to teach us something else. שאפילו עם הכלים מותר לטלטל את הדלתות. That you're allowed to move the vessels together with the דלתות. ואין חוששים שמא יחזור ויתקע אותן משבת. We know they're worried maybe he's going to put them there again on Shabbat. ומכל שכן מותר לטלטל את הדלתות בלי הכלים. So in other words, he says, it doesn't just tell you you're allowed to move the cabinets and the doors with it. It also tells you you're allowed to take the door without the cabinet. Just the door.
עכשיו באו אליי, came in Shabbos, I have 5 people came and I don't have place on this. I said, take this door, put 2 chairs, put it on, make a table.
Not the door for the house, but the door for the cabinet.
For the cabinet.
Yes.
The cabinet.
If you're allowed to make what you said, I'm not sure.
I'm not
but
sure,
whatever.
But
yeah, the idea.
You use it, you tell, use it.
The idea, yeah. The question is, are you making a table over here? That's a side issue, not for us. Not for us. Yeah, very good. So in other words, it wants to tell you that you're not allowed to just move the cabinet and then the door with it. You're also allowed to move the door without the cabinet.
Which this is weird because what do you need the door If the cabinet is there, why do you want to take the doors over there?
Oh, I'll give you an example.
Stairs?
Like the hammer to do the egozim. I'm going to use the door to cut salad on.
No, as make a table or make.
I'm not. It's a to cut
Also,
salad on. I'm using it for another purpose.
clean.
Yeah, I'm using it for another purpose.
That's why you
Yeah,
move.
just like the hammer for the nuts.